dear friend of ours, the founder of the Sharing Cities Alliance. And yeah, Harmen, go ahead. Fascinating.
Thank you so much, Yair, and thank you everybody for being here. It's, I think, so far a very interesting session. Of course, I'm a bit biased, but I really like the crowd, and I would have loved to indeed participate more with everybody that is in this session, but let's try to make the best of it while we're all in different places around the world. I'm very happy to have two guests in my session. One of them is Tjeerd Haccou. You can see him already here. Hi, Tjeerd. And the other one will be Tom, and he will probably join within a minute or so. And both these guys from the Netherlands are doing their best to make a little time for this session. So I think, Tjeerd, you just come from a meeting, and Tom is actually in the middle of giving a workshop and will make a break of 20 minutes to be part of it. So I think, again, he will join in soon. But let's start with you, Tjeerd. So I would love to hear a bit about your work. We'll try to keep it as a lively conversation, and as soon as Tom blends in, we'll also include him, of course, in the session. So, but we would love to hear a bit about you being one of the co-founders of Space&Matter. So go ahead, Tjeerd.
All right. Well, thank you, and thanks for inviting me to this session. Well, I founded with two partners Space&Matter as a spatial design firm 12 years ago, but it was a very bad time to start your firm because there were no commissions since it was a financial crisis. So it led us to create our own projects and ideas and becoming way more entrepreneurial than a regular design office usually is. So in the course of the years, we helped a lot of groups of people building their own buildings, so kind of developing their own buildings. And we launched several ventures dealing with the built environment, and to try to make a good and positive impact on that environment. So yeah, maybe that's in the sense of the sharing. What we found out in the past years is that if you, as an architectural firm, work with people that are creating their, develop their own housing projects, that there's a lot of positive things coming out of that. You get very close communities, not closed, but close communities, and more sustainable projects than you would have if we were working for commercially driven real estate developers.
So I think we talked I think a few weeks ago, and very interesting to hear about your work. And I think there are, too many examples from your agency that you have. It's also interesting to hear that you have what you call, I think, parallels, so you are making a lot of crossovers or collaboration with other initiatives. And I think one of them is, for example, crowd building, that you're sort of building and realizing a platform which is making it possible for people to work together or to collaborate if they want to build a house in the same neighborhood. So maybe it's interesting to hear something about that. And the other one, I think, could be, which is a really Dutch word, of course, schoon schip. Yeah. I would invite everybody from around the world to repeat what I just said, schoon schip. So again, as soon as Tom will blend in, we'll also tap into his examples, but maybe you can shine your light on those two, Tjeerd.
Yeah, definitely. I see Tom already in the meeting now. Yeah, well, schoon schip is maybe the most interesting then to start with. It translates as a clean ship, and it's an initiative that was started by just a girl who was visiting a houseboat once, a very sustainable one. And she then got the idea in her head that she would like to live with a group of friends on the water in Amsterdam in a super sustainable way. And well, a lot of friends of her friends were pretty excited about the idea too. And then they met us and asked us to help them in translating that idea into a plan. So we did that together with them at several workshops, and then they managed to get a location from the municipality of Amsterdam. And then built a super special neighborhood out of 46 homes. And well, I asked Harmen if I could share my screen to give you a bit of a visual of this neighborhood. He was
sure,
a bit
go
hesitant,
ahead.
but I'm going to do it anyways. so
break the rules, Tjeerd. Break the rules.
Definitely. I'm taking over. So this is that group of people, and this was the sketch that they made 10 years ago, and their idea was to do it in such a sustainable way that was never done before. So and they actually managed to achieve a lot of the ambitions that they have. So they take their heat out of the water with water-based heat exchangers. They have a solar-based microgrid in which they take energy from the sun and share it based on blockchain technology. They even have their toilet waste brought to a decentralized sanitation station, a biorefinery that changes that into biogas and heats up the houses with that again. And also a lot of experimental bio-based construction methods were used, such as straw bale housing and hempcrete housing. So super innovative and all done and thought of by the community itself. So here you see it in real life when it was. It took quite a while, but well, they managed, and it was then just brought and like towed into Amsterdam. Well, just some short images of that project, and it is really a community-centered design. And I think to go to the next, we have crowd. We see that in all over the world, there's all these bottom-up developments that have such great ambitions. They all want to be sustainable. They show a lot of quality. They want to be affordable, are full of innovation, all built around communities. And we thought we need to push this. So that's why we decided to set up a platform, because a lot of people have difficulty understanding how this real estate development process works. They don't have the money that you need to start a project like this, and it's very difficult to find locations, and also very difficult to find peers to do this, to collaborate with, to find your neighbors in advance. So that's why we made the crowd building platform that does exactly this. I'll show you a little sneak preview. It is about all these different new collective housing typologies that you can get inspired by. And then, for instance, it's only in Dutch, but this is the eco village. And if you like to live in eco village and all the ideas that are in it, you can follow this concept and be updated on all the new projects that start. But you can also tell us where you would like an eco village like this, and in that way we can see what concepts are liked by what people in what locations, and start up projects from the bottom up. So
yeah, that's
a great
two examples. No, yeah, you did very well. Otherwise, I would have just cut you off. So don't worry, I will break the rules too. No, but thank you. Those are very exemplary, I think, and hopefully sparking also the minds of people around the world, and especially maybe in Israel today. I think it's also a great bridge maybe to the recent project that Tom from Accept launched like last week even. So it's really fresh, which is called Orchid City. So maybe, Tom, if you're ready for it, you could briefly introduce yourself, your organization, and tell something about Orchid City. And then afterwards, maybe we can see how we can blend the great work of you two guys together and export that to the rest of the world, because, of course, that is also what the Dutch like to do. So, Tom, please go ahead.
Hi, guys. Pleasure to see all of you here. Some familiar faces. Hi, Tjeerd, Harmen. And some new ones. And Peter, I think we've met before. My name is Tom Bosschaert. I founded Accept Integrated Sustainability in 1999. And we are a consortium of researchers, designers, engineers, and business developers. And we work on fundamental solutions for long-term sustainable societal transitions. We do that in commission by working for organizations and designing cities, as well as transition roadmaps for companies. But we also invest in our own projects that we then feel raises the bar of development. And the recent project is Orchid City, as Harmen said, and it brings together our 20 years of sustainable development experience in what we think is the first really fundamental sustainable blueprint for a self-sufficient city. And that means that it's not just in terms of energy and materials, something that takes care of its own needs. So it generates its own electricity, it cleans its own water, and it has a beautiful environment, but it also provides all of its own food. It provides all of its own social services as well as jobs. And it has things like bio-based manufacturing as part of that whole ecosystem of living together. And we've modeled that, and we created a system that allows us to grow or shrink it depending on the situation, and to adapt it to different climates and cultures as well. And that's something that we are now trying to find the first locations for executing these plans. Yeah, that's the summary.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, last week in your presentation, I also saw that you're seeking collaborations, which I think is the best way to do, of course, especially when you want to sort of conquer the world with your projects. And so Peerview was one of them. So we just had a short presentation by Dan, and I just learned also that you know Dan even from your youth. So it's indeed a small world. But what would you be looking at if you look at collaborations, and also say that, for example, in your roadmap in a few years, people in this case from Israel would be interested to also have an Orchid City project within their country? Who would you be looking for? Who today maybe in the crowd could be knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, Tom, let's bring it to Israel"? And the same question maybe more or less goes for Tjeerd with your projects, of course.
Yeah, so these kinds of ambitious projects are always a collaboration between a whole range of different parties. We have a basic set available in order to execute these kinds of projects, but for each and every project we seek collaborations with, first and foremost, local parties that really know all the ins and outs of the specific location where we execute our work. For example, now we are investigating an Orchid City in Vietnam, which means that we're tightly collaborating with both architecture firms, developers, and material suppliers in Vietnam, as well as the schools that will be managed by local Vietnamese organizations, the food production done by local agricultural cooperatives, and so on. At the same time, from who we bring along with our expertise, we have a basic framework of partners, of which Peerview is one, as well as several others, architecture firms, developers, material providers. But we are definitely inviting everyone who feels that they can truly contribute to this to join. And the first kinds of parties that we are currently looking for are those who are able to provide land and a place for this to be executed, capital investors, as well as service providers for detailed areas. For example, we have 5 or 6 different architecture teams that will be working on different kinds of housing. Some are specialized in the schools, some are specialized in the apartment buildings, others in freestanding houses or the sport complexes or something like that. So it's a big kind of collaborative enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And Tjeerd, how about you? I mean, you mentioned 2 examples, but you are thinking, I'm thinking that you're also working, of course, with GrowX, for example, yeah, which is about vertical farming, and also having not only the more warehouse kind of project, but also more for in cities and closer neighborhoods. Yeah. Is that also something that is scaling abroad, and what would you sort of need there, or what would you like to accomplish within the coming years? And also knowing the fact, and I think more or less the same goes for Tom, that you are both really working from purpose. So it's not always easy maybe to work with like the establishment if you want to break the rules, if we want to talk about breaking the rules again. So how do you go about this by sort of chasing your purpose while working with the establishment around the world?
Yeah, well, you say that right, Harmen. We feel that, you know, if I showed you just the projects that we're doing bottom up, and that is a bit the approach that we want to have in many of the projects and products that we're involved with. But the current system doesn't always allow for these things. So what we are trying to do, and you noted it already, we are setting up a different company next to Space&Matter, and we call it Parallels. And with Parallels, it's a kind of venture builder that we really want to work on a parallel system. So we want to see how we can do things differently, and we don't want to change the current system. We just want to show that you can also do things in a different way. We're examining how we can make real estate using, you know, in the bottom-up way, based on blockchain and maybe cryptocurrency that you can use as a new currency for people that really do things themselves. But we're also working, as you said, with GrowX, which is a vertical farming company. And what they do is they don't just make crops in a very efficient way, but they also do that using bio-waste as their source of energy. So they cater restaurants and supermarkets, and from those restaurants and supermarkets, they take all bio-waste, they digest it, they take water, they take biogas out of it, they take nutrients out of it, and they use that in the vertical farming cells. And by doing that, they need no external water source. So they can just, like 70% of bio-waste is water. So a lot of times that is just burned, also in very dry places. So that is a super smart way of reusing that. And this is something that we are, like the GrowX farms are not just farms that are tucked away in some warehouse, but we also really want to bring them to the community and host programs to educate people on and kids on how you can grow your food, but also how to eat healthy food. So and in that way, well, really make healthy communities. And for this farm, we are for this concept, the urban food hub, as we call it, we are also looking for locations globally. So we're having we're talking to Los Angeles, to California, to Norway, to Denmark, to like all places in the world. So Israel might also be a very interesting place to find a place for that. And there's a lot of investment already. We can always use more, but in principle, we just need sites to build. As you know, same as Tom, locations are the most scarce things that you can that there are.
Yeah. Okay, great. You know, we could talk for hours, but we couldn't in this session. So I already have to go to last question, which can only have a snappy answer from the both of you. So maybe start with Tom. You know, 2030 is really near. And I think for many of us, also for our organization, the Sharing Cities Alliance, 2030 also has always been a sort of, yeah, maybe say deadline, literally. And recently I came to this conclusion that it's a little bit more than 3,000 days only until it's 2030. So that sort of makes you aware even more the sense of urgency that should be there. Well, I think many of us here, and especially also US speakers here, have that sense of urgency, but what would be a very short sort of suggestion to people in the crowd, and maybe also more to the establishment around the world, to feel the sense of urgency, and maybe even more important, to act on it, you know? How could we do that? So what could be one golden suggestion from you two guys to do so?
Just one. If I can go ahead, sure, I'll bite. I think after 20 years of doing this work with many failures and several successes in moving forward, and seeing the conversation change over 20 years from replacing plastic bags with canvas bags towards much larger global patterns of survival of humanity on this planet. What is important to understand is that the current conversation about sustainable development is something that follows trends that change every couple of years. So we have the circular economy, or we have bio-based, the bio-based economy, or the blue economy. And those elements are important, but they are not yet the foundation of sustainable development by itself. Sustainable development is more than this. That includes the whole social realm, including social justice and aspects like that, and long-term system dynamics that have to do with aspects such as resilience. And this is something, the word resilience is now in the last year or the last 2 years being named more and more. And you see it's a more fundamental aspect of sustainable development than, for example, just providing for energy or water or food resources. These are all part of the same story, but they're not the same thing. So in order to be useful for the next 10, 20, 30 years, to be able to work on true sustainable development, I think it is important to start understanding and creating the capacity, learning through education, but also through research and investment, to work on these long-term, resilient, systemic, sustainable solutions. And they include far more than these momentary focus aspects of now we're concerned with energy, and now we're concerned with scarce resources such as rare earth or biodiversity. All of them are part of the conversation, but they are not in itself the conversation. And I think you can't do more than invest in that knowledge infrastructure, that capacity for understanding and collaborating on these more longer-term strategic developments. That's what I would say.
And I would almost say amen. So thank you so much for that thought. Just very briefly, Tjeerd, what is something that you would like to add? But we have to keep it really brief because we have to go already to the end of the conference.
No, I think what Tom said, the integrated mindset is super important. Don't look at the silos, but integrate it. And I really believe that change comes from the bottom up. So it starts with you guys yourself. Find your peers and team up to make change happen.
Lovely. It's almost like I hear myself talking. Thank you so much, Tjeerd and Tom, for making the time. I will immediately go back to Yair and Yair. So maybe you can stick around for 10 minutes or go back to your workshops and your meetings and go continue.
May I give one short suggestion?
Very short.
In order to understand all of this, if you would like, there is a free book. It's this book. It's entirely free and rights free to download, to understand systemic sustainability for the long term, that I believe may help those who would want to learn to get a better grip on what it is and how to work on it.
Thank you so much. We'll put all the resources and also the link to the book, indeed, the output of the conference.